Welcome. Today we are going to address the spark plugs on the Nissan. The Nissan is about at 130,000 miles. That's where I bought it at, and I don't know if it was ever done at the 100,000 mile mark when it should have been done. So we're going to go ahead and replace those today. The 4-liter 6-cylinder is a standard inline 6, so the spark plugs run down the side, each side of the motor. And the design of the Nissan is it's a coil on spark. So each spark plug has its own coil that ignites the spark plug in a specific order. There's pros and cons to this design. One of the pros is one coil can go bad at a time and you don't have total loss of the vehicle. It starts to misfire, of course, but you don't have one single point of failure for the coil pack. Unfortunately, if the coil does go bad, they are very expensive to replace, and there's 6 of them. So either way, neither here nor there, considering that's how it is, we can't change it. There is some obstruction on the left side of the motor or the passenger side, depending on how you look at it. The intake and the throttle body and a few other things are in the way, so we're gonna have to remove those. On the right side, or driver's side, it's pretty straightforward. There's only a few little hoses here and there that those can kind of just get gently pushed out of the way to get access to the coil and the spark plug. Secondly, the recommended spark plug for this car is an NGK double platinum. I did not buy NGK double platinum spark plugs. A few reasons. Mostly is because they're $12 a piece. 12, over 6 spark plugs costs up or adds up. It's over $70. I went with an Autolite double platinum, and it was like $28 for all 6. Now, if you are going to be using the truck, if you have a like a 4-wheel drive, you're going to be off-roading in it. If you're going to be towing something with it, definitely go with a nicer, better rated spark plug. For me, this is effectively, the entire purpose of this truck is for these videos, and I commute to work with it. So I'm not putting any additional load on it. Nothing really special about what I'm doing with the truck. I'm just driving it around. So I went with something a little more affordable. So also, when you're messing with anything that's electronic in the vehicle, spark plugs are no exception, you always want to start by removing the negative battery cable so you don't have any electricity running through the car. If you, for some reason, accidentally short out a coil pack or any particular reason, you connect something when you're messing with the motor, you could shock yourself or mess up your coil packs or anything else that you're removing to get to them. So definitely be careful, remove that negative battery cable, and we don't really have to worry about any issues there. So that's about it. Let's get started and get these spark plugs replaced. I went ahead and disconnected the negative battery terminal, so that way when we start messing around with the electrics, we don't have to worry about anything. But to get to the spark plugs on the left side of the motor, we need to remove quite a bit of the coverings and the air induction system. So I'm going to start by taking off this front air intake, the engine cover, some PCV tubes, and then we're going to start working on the actual intake manifold as well. So we'll start with that, and then once we get that out of the way, we'll see where we stand. Now that these pieces of the intake are removed, we're going to have to actually remove the intake collector. What's involved in that? Well, I'm glad you asked. An absolute ton of work. A lot of this is going to have to be removed, including the throttle body, the top of the collector, whatever the heck that is. I don't even know what that is yet. Some wire looms off of the rear. All of this just to get to the other 3 spark plugs. The 3 over here, are already exposed. We can do those in just a few minutes. The rest, unfortunately, have to be uncovered before we can get to them. So let's remove that, and then we can get started on the plugs. All right, we're going to start by removing the control actuator or throttle body first. So if you saw the throttle body replacement video, these hoses are actually filled with antifreeze. If you read any Nissan instructions, they're going to tell you to completely drain the system. I think that's ridiculous. if you just remove these and get a container that they can go into, there's really only a little bit of fluid that comes out because it's at the top of the system. So there's no reason to drain the whole system. Once that's done, you need to remove the bolts, and you need to remove them in a specific order. And that order is 1, 2, 3, 4. And when you put them back on, it's the other way around. So 1, 2, 3, 4. All right? So first, the electronics are pretty easy. You can just pull those off with your fingers. And while we're at it, we're gonna pull off this guy as well. This is the, I don't know what control it is, but it's an electrical connector that needs to be removed prior to taking off the intake. So we've done that. We're gonna take off these hoses, and then we're gonna pop this off as well. And so that's out of the way. We do not wanna damage this part. It's 150 bucks online or 770 from Nissan. So you really don't wanna mess with this part. Not to mention we just fixed it. So we'll take that off, and then we're gonna keep moving backwards. There's a bracket below here that needs to get loosened. And then I believe there's 4 or 6 different bolts that hold this whole intake on. And there's a few other vacuum hoses in the rear, but we'll get to those. Now that the control actuator has been removed and this vacuum hose was removed, there's another vacuum hose in the rear of the intake that you can simply take off just by getting a regular ring. You'll see it back here. It's pretty obvious that it needs to be removed. And then also there's this electrical loom that we're gonna wanna get away. It's connected to the actual the intake collector. So we want that removed before we remove the collector itself. Once the loom's pulled away from the collector, you're gonna see another electrical connection that needs to be slid out of a bracket before you can take the collector off the motor. So remove that. It just slides out of a metal clip. Just do that, and then we should be able to start taking the bolts off the collector. All right, so we're ready to start taking the bolts off of the collector itself. I'm gonna leave as much on it as I can. I really don't wanna go through disconnecting all this if it's all just connected to the collector itself. I took a quick look around. It looks like everything all the way around it has been disconnected. So I'm just gonna kind of mark these as I go to kind of show you how many I'm taking out and where approximately they are. And also I'll try to do a top-down view as well to show you that. So I'm gonna start taking these out. We're going to start loosening it up, and then there's also the bracket over here that we need to take care of before removing the collector from the engine bay. Well, we're down to the last few nuts and bolts here, and it does appear that we need to actually remove this vacuum container to get access to one of the nuts that needs to be removed. So I'm going to remove this, remove that nut, and then remove the 2 supports that are underneath this little tube here, and then we're ready to rock. Okay, there was one more connector for the loom, an electrical connector that needed to be removed from the rear, and especially now that we have this rear exposed, there is one more vacuum hose that goes into the rear that I could not see before. So I'm going to take that off, and then this whole piece should come away from the motor. So let me just grab this. Okay. There we go, it's out. Now that this is out, I can kind of show you how it went in. So as far as actually attaching to the block itself or the intake manifold, this is actually the rear. So this would flip like this into the motor, it would flip this way, and this would be the back bolt, this would be the front. So there's a mixture of bolts and nuts you need to remove, but it will be obvious in the motor because on the top of the intake manifold there's bolts sticking out in 2 locations. So it's just a kind of back and forth pattern to get to the rear of the motor once it's out. The rest is just all that secondary and tertiary shit that needed to be removed along with the actual intake collector itself. So now that this is out, all 6 of our spark plugs are easily accessible. So if you're thinking this is an absolutely insane amount of work to do just to get to your spark plugs, well, you would be right. But it is what it is, and now we get to dig into our spark plugs and get those replaced and get the engine running nice and smooth. So on we go. Now that we actually have some access to the spark plugs and the coils, we can start removing them. Now, removing them is actually really straightforward. So you have an electrical connector, the coil, the bolt that holds on the coil, and then the boot which is underneath, and of course the spark plug. So the electrical connectors, you can just kind of push your finger down on these and they slide right out. Really straightforward. The bolt is of course a 10 millimeter, like almost everything in this car seems to be. So you just gently take those out. All right, pretty easy break. Didn't take much tension on that. So we want to keep taking that out. Slide that out. Now the boot itself just slides out of the block. So take the boot, pops off of the spark plug, slide it out, and then you want to take your spark plug socket. Mine has a little bend on it, just kind of makes it easier to get it on the spark plug itself. Here's the socket here. If you don't have one that bends, it's really not a big deal, especially in this application. If we were working in tighter quarters, you know, this would come in handy, but really it's not a big deal for today. So just take that, slap it on, and then slide it into place. Now these have a lock on them, so they kind of tighten themselves around it using a little rubber gasket. So you just want to kind of get it on there, and then once it's on there, you can kind of put some pressure on it to break it. All right, hold on. I don't want to get it at a weird angle here. There we go. All right. So now that it's broken, just back it out. So these have pretty long threads, so let's just keep going here. All right, so it feels like it's out. Yep. All right, spark plug is out and severely burned. Now that the spark plugs are out, there's a few things I want to show you. I'm not terribly surprised, but it appears that the spark plugs are original to the car. So I have my new one here and my old one on the other side, and you can tell just by looking at them, the old spark plug is absolutely fried. That white note at the top is not a good sign. It means that it's burning, that there's been it's been running either hot or just running for a very long time. And in this case, I think it's just been running a very long time. So it's very timely repair. I'm glad that we're doing it. It's very important that we do it for a lot of reasons. Obviously, with a spark plug this bad, you're looking at poor fuel economy, definitely poor performance, and eventually these are going to start misfiring. So, but now that we have the boot and the spark plug out, there's a few things we want to do before putting it back in. Now, the boot itself, I'm actually not going to replace. These boots are not considered a maintenance item in the scheduled maintenance for the car. So this is going to be one of those things where I'm going to replace them if they break. They're not terribly expensive. It looks like they're about $8 or $9 a piece for just this boot. The coil is a different story. The coil on top's a different story, but just the boot is not maintenance, so I'm not going to replace it. What I am going to do is do two different things. We have anti-seize lubricant that we're going to do for the threads on the spark plug itself. We want to make sure that in the future, if we ever have to take these out again, that they're not going to be super hard or actually get caught inside of the block. We definitely don't want that. Secondly, there's dielectric grease for the contact between the boot and the spark plug. So that way, it basically avoids getting any corrosion on the connectors between the spark plug and the boot. And obviously corrosion is bad. It reduces connectivity between the two. So my method for doing this is basically just taking a little Q-tip and taking the dielectric grease and just kind of putting a little bit on the end of the Q-tip. You don't need a lot for this. So we're going to put a little bit on the end of the spark plug itself. There we go. Just a little bit, just basically like a smudge. Remember, all we're doing is basically creating a seal on this metal so it doesn't corrode. And then on the other side, I'm just going to put a little bit on the inside, just dab it. There's some pretty sensitive electronics in here. You don't really want to put a ton in there or jam it in too hard. You don't want to hurt anything. So just a little bit will do it. And then for the anti-seize, we're actually going to grab a different Q-tip, but do the same thing. So just grab a little bit. This has got a silvery kind of look to it. See that? And then you want to put that on the threads. Now put it a little bit higher on the threads, because that is where it actually contacts. Most of the threads will just pass right through the block and kind of sit inside of the cylinder. So grab some more. Just get a little bit on there. Again, you don't need to go crazy with this stuff. This is really more for the future. This is if you need to take them out or the next time they need to get replaced, which really with the Xterra, the maintenance requirement for spark plugs is 100,000 miles. So I really don't think you're gonna have to worry about it for quite some time. And in my case, there's already 130,000 miles on the truck. So if anyone's gonna be redoing the spark plugs, it isn't gonna be me. So, all right, so that's done. So we're gonna put this back into the block. Basically just reverse what we did to take it out, screw this in, plug this in, put the connector back on, and you're done. So let's go do that. All right, we put it back in. You want to just get it on the same ratchet that you took it out with. Slide it and make sure it seats pretty well so it doesn't come out when you turn it over. And then we'll slide it in. All right, just be careful not to hit it against the side walls or anything like that. And just make sure it's straight on. So let me move my arm here. Make sure it's straight into the hole. You don't want to go in at an angle or anything like that. That's just going to, make sure it doesn't seat correctly. So this one looks like we're screwing in just fine. So keep going until you feel some tension. And then once you feel some tension, you don't want to really rank on it. There's no reason to do that. Not to mention, if you break this plug off inside of the motor, you're going to be in a world of hurt. So keep going. It's really long threads. All right, so feel the tension there, and just give it a little bit of pressure, nothing crazy. All right, that's it. Now the boot, really you see you have a screw hole next to the port for the spark plug. Just line that hole up with it and slide it on. All right, get everything out of the way here. All right, you'll kind of feel like a little click. That's the way you know that it's in. And then once you're done with that, just take your bolt, slide it back on, and then tighten that down. Now, once you do that, now that all these are exposed, you can just repeat that process 5 times, and there's no more obstructions. So get those done, and then we can move on with putting everything back together. Okay, so a few quick things before we start buttoning everything back up. Since everything's exposed, first and foremost, take the opportunity to just take like a dry shop rag and just wipe down the intake manifold where the collector meets the manifold. Hopefully, you're not going to be accessing this very often, so it's a good time to just go ahead and wipe it down. And also be careful not to get a bunch of junk into the actual parts themselves. Probably not the end of the world, since it'll kind of just burn up and blow out, but at the end of the day, you want to avoid getting a bunch of stuff in there. Secondly, make sure that all of the connectors are out of the way before putting the collector back in. You don't want to pinch anything or get anything caught where it shouldn't be. And also, the things that are on the back of the collector, you want to do first. So you have this vacuum hose, this electrode connector, and this loom kind of snaps into the collector. You want to get this put in first and kind of try to slide this on first and then set the collector in place, because once it's in place, the back here gets really tight. Lastly, make sure all of your coil packs on top of your spark plugs are on tight, and all of the electrode connectors are on tight, especially on the left side of the motor, seeing that, you know, once the collector's back on, it would be an absolute massive pain to get back to these. So once that's all done, really just reverse everything we did to get it off, and then that will finish us up. So let's do it. Okay, let's hear the fruits of our labors. All right, purring like a kitten. Now, I didn't throw any codes, but if you do notice that your check engine light comes on, that's probably because you didn't put a vacuum hose on right, or just didn't put it back on at all. So I know there's a lot to reconnect, and there's a lot of things that are kind of going on when you remove that air intake connector, but it is what it is. It needs to get done. You have to take that off to do the job properly. But once it's done, you really don't have to worry about it for another 100,000 miles. So definitely worth the effort. I would say set aside an hour and a half to 2 hours for the job. Took me about 3 hours, but that's, of course, taking the video, which always takes time. But as always, thanks for watching. And if you have any comments, questions, or recommendations, put them in the comments below. Thanks. Bye.